Right, morning year seven. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a sort of combination of two things. The first part of the lesson, we're going to just review our work on pyramids of numbers, and we're going to have a quick look at energy flow. And then the second part of the lesson is going to be a sort of revision research task. So firstly, what I would like you to do today is we're going to explain what happens to energy along a food chain. So just to give you an idea of what I mean by this, if you look at the food chain from your previous lesson, not slides, where do plants get their energy from? Okay, so if you have a look back, you'll see that all plants get their energy from the sun. What name is given to the process that plants use to make glucose, and what happens to energy and biomass as it moves along the food chain? Right, I'd like you to write down these two questions in your book and leave a little bit of space underneath to try and answer them. And then just see if you can work out what the answer is to both. Try and write your best answer as it stands. So pause the video now and do that, please. You could even quickly research online what the answers could be. Okay, welcome back. So number two was quite easy. The process plants use to make glucose is called photosynthesis. Okay, photo is the old Latin word for light, and synthesis or synthesize is to make. So making from light, that's where the word comes from. And that's what plants do. They take carbon dioxide and water, and they use sunlight to convert it into glucose, which is their energy store. Right, what happens to energy and biomass as you move along the food chain? Now, this is the question you might have struggled with. Okay, so we're going to have a look at that now, and you can write your answer after we've finished. So, when an animal or plant is eaten, the energy it contains passes to the animal that has eaten it. So if we just go back to this for a moment, plants make glucose, they make sugar. And essentially, from that sugar, they can make all sorts of other compounds. And that sugar, that energy, and all those other compounds get moved up the food chain to the next animal, okay? And so on and so on. So how does this actually happen? So at each transfer, only a small proportion of the energy taken in ends up in stored tissue. The rest is lost. So, for example, plants get eaten by herbivores, animals which eat plants. They then get eaten by a primary carnivore and then a top carnivore. Now, you've probably heard other phrases such as primary consumer, secondary consumer, and so on and so forth. Okay, but remember, most of the energy is lost. Okay, and that's key to answering this question. What happens to the energy and biomass along the food chain? Now, to answer that, we need to answer what biomass is. So I'm just going to pause the video for a second, and we're going to try and add in what is biomass. Okay, can you write that question down and research what the answer is and write your best answer, please? Okay, off you go. Okay, so your answer would be biomass is the mass or weight of living material at a certain level in the food chain. So what we mean by that is if we took this, for example, plants, well, let's just say we took all the grass from a field and that was living material and we actually weighed it, we might have a few tons of grass. That few tons of grass might support maybe 500 kilograms of carnivore, so of herbivore. So we might have, say, rabbits living in this field eating the grass. We might have, say, 100 rabbits. And if we weighed all of those 100 rabbits together, it might weigh, say, 500 kilograms. Now, we would then have, say, a stoat would be a primary carnivore consumer. Now, you might only have, say, 20 stoats living in this field. They eat rabbits. Okay, they're a little bigger than rabbits, but their biomass, if you took all those stoats and weighed these 20 stoats, they might only have a biomass of, say, 100 kilograms. So a few tons, 500 kilograms, so half a ton, maybe 100 kilograms. So each level, the less the mass is getting less and less. Remember, we're talking about the biomass, the mass of the living material. Plants are alive, rabbits are alive, stoats are alive. Okay, they all have mass. And then finally, a top predator like a fox, for example, which eat the stoats, there might only be 2 or 3 of them. Now, they weigh more than the stoats, but because there's less of them, they might only weigh, if we had, say, 3 of them, we weigh them all together, they might only have a biomass of, say, 25 kilograms. Okay, so we've gone from several tons of grass to half a ton of rabbit to 100 kilograms of stoat to maybe 25 kilograms of fox. Okay, so as you can see, as we move up the food chain, the biomass, the weight of the living things at that level, get less and less and less. Okay, and so a pyramid of biomass always, and I do mean always, looks like this. It will never be a random shape. It will always be the traditional pyramid shape. Because if you took the example I just showed you, grass, rabbit, stoat, and then I've just run over here, fox. Okay, that is a pyramid of biomass, and they're always, 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 always this shape. Pyramids of numbers can be slightly funny shapes, like this. Okay, but pyramids of biomass are always this traditional pyramid shape. So pause the video and quickly draw this out. So you can add that just to your notes. Pyramids of biomass are always this shape. Okay, so pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, welcome back. Now, the reason the pyramids of biomass are always this shape is because that mass gets lost every time you go up the food chain. Okay, so for example, energy and mass can be lost as heat, respiration. They lose some as waste, as urine. Okay, only a very, very small amount of biomass, of living material, is transferred up to the next level. Because if you think about this rabbit, a stoat comes along and eats this rabbit, it might not eat every part of it. And so therefore, not all the energy is transferred, not all the biomass is transferred up. Also, if the rabbit eats the grass, it's going to poo some of it out. So again, some of that biomass is lost as waste. Okay, and you can see here all the ways in which energy can be lost. So energy lost as heat from respiration, biomass can be turned into new horse, but some biomass is lost as wee, lost as poo or feces, as we call it in science, lost to movement or growth. So we can see all these different ways in which animals lose their biomass. So here's what I'd like you to do. Pause the video and I would like you to very quickly copy these 3 food chains and then try and answer this question. Okay, this will probably take you about 5 minutes because you're probably going to need to think about the answer to this, and then we'll come back and look at your answer in a moment. So pause the video and do that now, please. Okay, welcome back. So the answer was actually C. And the reason for this is because the more steps you have in a food chain, the more possibility there is for energy being lost. Think about it. Grass uses sunlight, but then the cow has to eat the grass. Now the cow has to move, the cow has to respire, the cow will waste energy as poo and wee. And so therefore, some of that energy is lost before it gets to us, the human. Same with the soybean. So we actually use soybean to feed the cow, and the same thing happens. We grow soybean. If we just ate soybean, our food chain would be much more efficient. So what this essentially shows you is If we were all vegetarian, we'd waste far less energy because energy wouldn't be lost because you wouldn't have these extra steps in the food chain. Okay, so if you didn't get that, pause the video and just do that now, please. Write your answer in. Now, one of the controversial things about energy in farming is how farmers could reduce the levels of energy for the animals they keep. And one of the things about this is, unfortunately, one way is to confine the animals so they don't move around. So, for example, pigs can be kept in pens like this, cows can be kept like this and just fed the straw. Now, some of you are probably already thinking, well, that's rather cruel. And you'd be right, there is a big ethical issue. If we go to other animals, for example, we've got battery chickens kept in these very small cages. We've got, I think, a picture of the cows, yeah, just kept in these little pens, just with their heads sticking out so they can feed. Or I think these are turkeys, which are kept in these very small barns, thousands and thousands of them. Okay, so the thing is, if they're kept inside, they don't lose energy trying to keep warm because it's cold outside. And because they're not moving around much, they don't waste energy. So it is a very efficient way of rearing animals. But the problem is, it's not particularly nice. There is a lot of controversy around this. Whereas you compare that to free range, you can see here the chickens are roaming in a field, same with the pigs, the sheep and the turkeys. They're allowed to behave in normal animal behavior. But of course, the downside to this is because the chickens are moving around, they're respiring more, they're wasting more energy, and of course, it takes longer for the farmer to be able to harvest, well, to slaughter these animals and sort of sell them. So, why do you think it is important, this information to farmers? The key reason, unfortunately, is money. It costs a lot more money to be ethical than it does to farm in perhaps a slightly more controversial way. Okay, so essentially, if you want lots of cheap meat, you don't have to pay too much for it. This is the way you farm. If you want to pay more for your meat, you're going to have to farm this way. So what I would like you to do is to research pros and cons of intensive farming versus, sorry about that. So what I'd like to do, yeah, is research and think about what you've just seen as well, the pros and cons of intensive farming versus free range. Now you can do this very simply. All you can do is a very simple table like this, and then do free range, sorry, intensive and free range, and then put in the pros and cons of each one. Okay, now this will require you not only taking what you've just seen, like this, but also possibly doing a little bit of research online. Okay, so I suspect this will probably take you about 10-15 minutes to do this once you've researched and filled it in. What are the good things and the bad things about each one? And then once you've finished underneath, I would like you to make a conclusion. So, conclusion would simply be, I would go with, say, free range, and then your reason why. Or maybe you'd go the other way. Maybe you'd go with intensive farming. Okay, so pause the video now, please. Do a bit of research into the pros and cons of each, and then make a conclusion. I would go with free range or intensive, and what are your reasons for making that choice overall? So basically, you'd be summarizing your pros and cons. Okay, pause that and do that now, please. Okay, last part of your task for today. So I would like you to copy up these four graphs. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is copy these up, and you do need to pay very close attention to the size, sorry, the width of these arrows. Okay, so pay very close attention to the width of these arrows. You don't need to get them exactly right, but you do need to get them roughly right. Okay, and then we're going to talk through that. So copy each four of these arrows up, paying close attention to the width of the arrows, and then I'm going to talk you through each one. Oh, and try and leave a little bit of space so you can label them. Okay, so welcome back. So what this is showing you is how different animals use different foods. So, for example, this animal is, as you can see, a herbivore. That means it eats plants. As large loss of undigested food and feces. Now, this is showing these arrows where the energy goes. This top arrow is always the arrow that shows the biomass which is being added. Right, now what that means is the animal eats its food, only this arrow is what becomes animal. Okay, the rest is lost. So from all this energy that's come in as food, only this one actually goes to growing or making new animal. Now, we can tell certain things about this. This animal is probably a cold-blooded animal because look at this thin arrow here. It shows that this animal doesn't give us very much heat, which means it's probably cold-blooded. It moves around quite a lot, but this is the big one. Look at this. Most of the energy, the biggest amount of energy that is lost is as feces and urine. And the main reason for that is because a lot of plant food is very difficult to digest. Okay, and so therefore, a lot of that energy is simply passed out of the animal's digestive tract. So, can you think of an animal that eats plants and is cold-blooded but moves around quite a lot? Pause the video and give it a quick go. Okay, so an example might be a tortoise. It's a reptile, which means it's cold-blooded. It does move around quite a lot. They do walk around, although not maybe a huge amount. But a lot of what they eat is going to be wasted. Very small amount goes to make new tortoise. Right, now here we've got an example. It's warm-blooded, as there's a big loss due to heat production. So you can see here, it eats its food. Only a small amount goes to make new animal. A lot is lost as feces, a lot is lost as movement, and a lot is lost as heat. So an example of this might be, say, a bird or a mammal, okay? But we'd need a bird or a mammal that does not eat plants. Now, how do we know it doesn't eat plants? How do we know it's a carnivore? Well, look at this one. This one over here was really big because a lot of plant material is very difficult to digest. But this, much less, is being wasted as feces and urine, which means the food they eat is easier to digest, which tells you that this is a carnivore. So it's a warm-blooded carnivore that moves around quite a lot. Think about what that could be. So that could be a bird of prey or a lion or tiger or something like that. But we know it's warm-blooded because it gives off a lot of heat. Look at that, all that energy being lost as heat. Only a very small amount, again, goes up to the next level. Okay, so this is slightly different. Another animal, which is cold-blooded. So, movement here, but look at this arrow again compared to this one. What does that tell us? It tells us that this is a carnivore because it's not losing very much energy or biomass as feces and urine, which means it's easily digestible. So this would be a cold-blooded, moving carnivore. So an example might be a fish, or it might that eats other fish, or it might be, say, a frog, which eats flies. Okay, and then finally, this animal is a carnivore, and little loss of undigested food and feces. So again, we can see that there. It moves and it's cold-blooded. Okay, so again, you could probably think of an example of that. Okay, so I've actually gone on a little bit longer today than I had intended. This lesson is about 20 minutes, and with the tasks I've added, it's probably about 40 minutes long. So I think we'll call it there. And then next lesson, what we are going to do is we are going to look at how top predators are adapted for their role within the food chain. So what you can start doing is start thinking about other top predators. Okay, so I'll give you a very quick idea. Think about all of these kinds of animals that you find in the wild: snakes, bears, sharks, cheetahs, tarantulas, crocodiles, piranhas, birds of prey, tigers. All of these ferocious creatures have certain things in common. Okay, so you can start to research these. And next week, we're going to do a bit of a research project into these top predators. Okay, um, so maybe make a choice and spend about 10 minutes just having a quick look at some initial research, but you're going to do the in-depth stuff next week. Okay, so very well done today, everyone. And I will see you later.